like to invite all guests to be seated. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, students, at this time I would like to introduce to the stage the Baroness Howells of St. David's, OBE, who is a distinguished Grenadian and the only parliamentarian in the House of Lords. She has had a long relationship with St. George's University and the current president of Windruff, the Research and Science Center based on St. George's University True Blue campus.
For the invitation to say a few words, and good afternoon to you all. It's been a few years that I've been coming to St. George's, and each time I say I'll be prepared, because the very first time I arrived late, and I then learned that I had to come up and say a few words to you. I have to tell you, this time I actually used the postcards from Grenada to write my speech. I know other people use computers, but I don't know what these things look like. And my excuse is that I won't be here by the time they go back to pens, so I keep on going. For me, it is always a pleasure to be invited to attend the white coat ceremony. I get quite a buzz from seeing a new generation entering a profession which we all depend on. I looked at the students as I met them along the way. Some of them I've spoken to, and I'm thinking they'll be donning their white coats very soon. We need doctors. We never have enough. And every generation has got first to learn what was past, but they have got to learn what is new, what is happening, because it's a changing world. I admire them. I remember when my sister graduated, it was the moment my papa, never had a daddy, I had a papa, was waiting for, and he said, I can't go to London. You will have to go. I was going to Hollywood. That was my plan. I can't sing, I can't dance, and I certainly have no rhythm. But I liked Elizabeth Taylor, and it seemed a good enough reason to go. I came to what the weather we're having now. It was April, but we have that sort of weather. And I can assure you that I was leaving the next day. It never happened. I think when I see the white coat ceremony and I see the faces of the young people who have chosen a very noble profession, when I hear them repeat the Hippocratic Oath, I think, and we are making laws to ask them to do things that they're swearing today they'll never do. And I do what mothers do. I become no longer a peer, I'm a mother. I worry. Why are they asking them to do these things? And I do try very hard to think of something to say that would change the road that they're going, that the members of the House of Lords are going down. And there are lots of us in there who do just that. We try to remind them that days like today, which many of them never had the privilege of seeing, is actually what being someone who looks after the health of the nation would have sown to do. Sometimes we use words like assisted dying. No, why don't we say, let us murder all the old people or those who are ill. We use nice words that cover up things. And your generation is going to face many more changes. But it makes me happy to know that when you've donned the white coat today, you will also make the oath in front of many of us, and you will always live by it. I was very lucky to have a nun who took an interest in me when I was in her class at school. And I wasn't the really respectable person that I am now, but I won't bore you with those things. But only to say that I wrote my penance in advance. I had a book for that. I want to address you first to say that you have chosen a very noble profession. The country cannot do without you, any country you're in. But being here in this university, you're never really out of touch and out of place, because you'll meet and learn from other students, and I urge you to take advantage of that as students, because you learn so much about other people's cultures that you will never make the mistake of underestimating people, whether they're refugees coming into the country or they're people who are coming for experience. Sometimes where I sit, I wonder if they are speaking about people. And when I have the opportunity to remind you, you may be in that position as well as in your profession, and you will be expected to stand up for the oath you took. I don't want to be serious about this because I know you'll learn it on the way, but I'd like to say that particular nun wrote in my book when I was leaving school. She said, your life is like the path of driven snow. Be careful how you tread it, as every mark will show. And I've lived by this. I may be wrong in what I stand for, but I always would urge you to have the courage to believe, as you do in your dreams now about being a doctor, believe in what you can defend. And best of all, learn more about what you want to defend so that you can stand your ground. You will have some people, especially the press in this country, who will try to persuade you differently. Believe me, you will be taxed on your profession. Remember, it is a noble profession, and it's one that we can't have enough of. Now, when she mentioned those lines, she ended by saying, every mark will show. And I can assure you that I look forward to the day when every mark that you have made, the students I'm speaking to today, that I'll be able to follow it. Or when I go to the other place, because I know that can't be very long, I will be able to look down on you and say, the boy has done well, or the girl has done well. Now, for me, that is important, and that is why I am so happy to be here today. But I had another surprise this week. I have a birthday very early in the year, in January, and sometimes the newspapers, well, the Times and the Telegraph and the Guardian, write the birthdays of people in their columns, and lots of people would like to be there some people, as my grandson would say, have a trust upon them. They don't work for it, meaning me, of course. I've had well, according to my daughter, I've stopped counting after 400 greeting cards. And I also had my colleagues coming up to me and greeting me. And I'd never actually read what was in the paper. And it gave the year of my birth. Now, for years, that was my secret. I never told anybody that I was actually born on such and such a day. So, we're now at 1,000, but perhaps the one that made me the happiest was receiving this from the Alumni Association, wishing me happy birthday and saying how pleased they are to have me as an alumni. I hadn't even thought about it. I'm very grateful to you. I'm grateful to Northumbria's alumni for remembering and reminding me that I'm one of them. Thank you for having me in your ranks.
Thank you, Baroness Howells, for your beautiful words. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shamil Harry-Heron. I'm a graduate of the SGU School of Medicine in 2013. I'm currently completing a residency in family medicine in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies for this afternoon. And at this time, I would like to invite the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Northumbria University, Professor Peter Francis, to the stage.
Good afternoon. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and of course new students. I'm delighted to welcome you all to Northumbria University and to the city of Newcastle upon Tyne. This is a very special occasion as we recognise the beginning of your learning journey to become qualified medical doctors. It is good to see so many of your friends and relatives here with you too to celebrate the start of your programme. I am sure they are very proud of your achievements and of the path that you have chosen. This is now the 8th year we have welcomed students from St George's University School of Medicine. Since 2007, we have received nearly 1,500 students onto the first year basic medical science programme, and I am delighted to see even more of you here today. All of you have chosen to make the care and well-being of others your purpose in life. And in many ways, you epitomise the mission of all universities, which strive to advance knowledge and apply it for the well-being of society. Such a choice brings great responsibilities, and you will expect to face some substantial challenges. But the knowledge that people and societies will benefit from your care will bring immense personal satisfaction and great professional fulfilment. We hope, myself, the Vice-Chancellor, my colleagues, that your time at Northumbria University will help you to develop a new understanding of cultures and societies, which in turn will contribute to the development of the qualities that are so important to the physician and surgeon. I'm pleased to say that the programme now includes selectives at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Gateshead, and that the curriculum has been enhanced to integrate it with more cultural and contemporary health issues. Our academic staff in the Faculty of Health and Life Sciences will help you to develop the intellectual capability, the curiosity and the clinical techniques you will require in your chosen field. But there are many more lessons that you will learn from this new learning environment. Using the clinical skills laboratories at our Coach Lane campus, you will have the opportunity to interact with other health professionals. This will, I hope, enable you to develop your team working skills, increase your knowledge and allow you to put theory into practice, a key component to becoming a qualified doctor. You arrive at a university with an ambitious vision for the future. Northumbria is a research-rich, business-focused, professional university. We're now recognised in the UK top 50 for research power, and have been recognised by Times Higher Education and as having the biggest rise in research power of any university following the Research Excellence Framework of 2014. We've demonstrated the largest rise in research rated as world leading and internationally excellent, and the university has almost tripled its share of research rated in these categories. This marks a major step change for Northumbria, positioning the university decisively as one of the fastest rising institutions in the UK higher education sector, while creating a broad and robust platform for the next phase of our development in research and learning and teaching. Our ambition is to be a university with a global reputation for academic excellence that provides an outstanding student experience and excellent graduate employment prospects. Our partnership with St George's University is a clear example of this global perspective, and through the Keith B. Taylor Global Scholar Programme, you are a true representation of all aspects of our vision. Northumbria University greatly values its partnership with St George's University. It is through partnerships like this that both universities can develop and thrive in a global world and realise their vision. Your time spent at universities in the UK and in the Caribbean will give you valuable international experience before you progress to clinical placements in the US, Canada and the UK. In addition, as part of our diverse student community, you will gain confidence, insight and perspective. I hope you will make many new friends. Certainly you will have countless opportunities to develop your own interests and personal strengths and curiosities. Our award-winning Students' Union leads an excellent programme of community action and volunteering, and we encourage you to engage with local communities wherever you can. But to finish, I'd just like to say that you are at the start of a great learning journey. My hope is that your experience as a student on the Keith B. Taylor programme will be life-changing and exhilarating. I wish you every success in your study at Northumbria and St George's and in your future medical careers. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite the Dean of Basic Sciences for the Keith B. Taylor Global Scholars Program, Dr. Marius Lucas, to the podium.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, parents, students, welcome once more and congratulations to the students for this specific day. The white coat ceremony is a very, very important day for you and for us. For us, because we're going to see you, we're going to hug you today, and we're going to hug you, hopefully, in 4 years' time during graduation. It signifies your first step in of your professional, continuous professional and academic development. It's something that it's like a baptism into the profession. It's extremely, extremely important because it signifies that you're part of the family of medicine. You have a lot of responsibilities and rights right now, and you have responsibilities, of course, to yourself and to your future patients. It was in 1993 the Arnold Gold pediatric neurologist developed the white coat ceremony, and it has been since followed throughout the entire world. Here in St. George's University, we believe in the white coat ceremony and the whole ideas behind it, such as dignity, humiliation, empathy, care and empathy for our patients. And it's extremely, extremely important to remember that moment and always remember that you have a responsibility to your patients. I'm pretty sure you're going to do great. You look great, and congratulations, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to further recognize the Gold Humanism Honor Society and the inductees for 2015. So the Arnold P. Gold Foundation was created the white coat ceremony, as Dr. Lucas mentioned, in 1993 to promote humanism in medicine. St. George's University School of Medicine initiated its own white coat ceremony in 1996, long before many other U.S. medical schools started following this tradition. In 2003, the Gold Foundation founded the Gold Humanism Honor Society, which is an international society dedicated to the promotion of humanism, professionalism, and ethics in medical practice and in education. And SGU annually inducts new members into its own chapter of the GHHS every year. The SGU's chapter of Gold Humanism Honor Society envisioned and established the Humanitarian Student Organization in 2009, through which preclinical students can engage in services and activities for their community with the support of the Gold Foundation. And if you look in your program, the names of all the 2015 inductees can be found on there. And these inductees are currently doing their fourth year rotations, and we honor their achievements. So the white coat ceremony symbolizes this exciting moment and the beginning of a new journey. At this moment, we're all full of drive and enthusiasm and big dreams. And for some reason, we tend not to keep that same vitality and grandeur in our dreams as the years pass by. In line with the Gold Humanism Honor Society's philosophy, I want to discuss the importance of finding meaning in every day and in every experience, and why it's important to start cultivating that habit now. There's been a lot of talk over the past few years about physician wellness, about preventing burnout, and who's happy and why. Studies have shown that people who identify their lives as meaningful actually live healthier and more satisfying lives. And the undertone is that meaning is a key part of what makes us human. We have all chosen a caring profession. It's in our nature to want meaning in our lives on a day-to-day basis. There's a physician named Rachel Redman who has shed a lot of light on this particular topic. We practice the more concrete parts of medicine with the solid foundation that we form in learning about science and about medicine, but we heal with our humanity. Dr. Redman says that as healers, we can guide people toward their potential for growth and their hidden wholeness. And to be a healer is a great honor and a lifelong learning experience. So knowing that and saying it is easy, but holding on to it through hours of studying at the library, through exam time, through 80-hour work weeks in residency, and night shifts in ICU, that's the challenging part. And I can honestly say it to you all with firsthand experience. And it's challenging, no doubt, but what I've learned is just how important it is to keep us going. So I enjoy traveling, and over the past few years I've sought out psychics in the desert and shamans in the Amazon jungle, and this has all been in search of meaning and connection. And the greatest thing I've learned is that meaning comes from within, and it grows from our connections with the people around us and the world around us. When I look back on my experience in medical school, which really was not very long ago, there's only certain things that are highlighted in my mind. And these were the things that kept me going through this challenging process that we all commit to. And while I won't forget the many late hours at the library and weekends after exams of bananas, which when you all go to Grenada, you will learn is the watering hole of choice for students at SGU. But it was the things that brought meaning to my experience that really stuck with me. We had a wonderful group in Grenada, which was a student chapter of Physicians for Human Rights, which is still active and going strong at SGU now. And one event that we did every semester was a coffee house open mic night. And each time we did this event, we would work with different grassroots community organizations. And these were typically groups that were doing great things, such as working to decrease HIV/AIDS discrimination in Grenada, or we're working on food and water security on the island. And we would hold this event to help them raise funds for a specific project that we would work with them on pursuing. And we would hold this event once a semester. It was in the evening at the Caribbean House with students, faculty, staff, and other community members. And at this event, we would share music and art and poetry with the True Blue Bay at our side. And it was this process of sharing and of creating something together toward a common purpose that was so meaningful. And I remember this as a very magical and formative time in my learning experience and in my career thus far. So medical school is no doubt challenging, and the next few years will carry some of the most difficult moments in all of your lives, but they will also carry some of the most wonderful moments in your lives. And the people that you see around you will become your family through all of this. So over the coming months and years, I implore you to make this more than just a rotation of books and labs and exams, and form your foundation, but also enrich your experience. And become a part of the community both here in Newcastle and when you move to Grenada. And engage in things that make you feel more than happy, but that give you a real sense of purpose. And make this an adventure rather than a means to an end. In my formal medical training thus far, I've been in Grenada, in New York City, and now I'm in an urban neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina. And though these places are all very different in many ways, there's certainly many parallels between them all. And particularly in realizing on a fundamental level, people are very much the same no matter where you are. In search of day-to-day meaning, I often look to connections with patients. And in every place I've been, I've had patients who inspire me, for example, in their drive to take charge of their health despite significant socioeconomic barriers. I've had patients who have moved me through times of suffering, either with themselves or with a family member. And I've definitely had plenty of patients who have made me laugh. In my clinic in Charlotte, which is in an urban neighborhood, I had a patient early in residency, and I was following her through her pregnancy for prenatal care. And at one of our visits, she expressed her great enthusiasm and anticipation for her baby's due date and her hopes that the baby would come on time. And upon further discussion, she explained that her enthusiasm was actually coming from the fact that she had tickets to an R. Kelly concert, which was shortly after her baby's due date. So didn't want to miss that. But jokes aside, what I've learned regardless of where you're practicing and what patient population you work with, that the basis of health really lies in a balance of mind, body, and spirit. And our job as healers is to guide our patients in finding this balance and making it last. So remember that when caring for your patients, and also in caring for yourselves and those around you, especially in these coming 2 years, never dismiss the importance of the whole person and in the mind-body-spirit connection. And during these years, learn the essential foundations of science and medicine and how to put them into practice, but also blossom into healers and stay connected with your humanity through the rigors of med school. Remember to always look deeper, to feel fully, and to find meaning in every day and every experience. And you all, as global scholars and just as students of SGU, have chosen to explore and grow from the experience of being in an unfamiliar place. Through the rigors of med school, don't forget to still adventure and take risks and do things that make you uncomfortable, because that's when things really get good. And this will not be a straight and narrow path, and this is a really exciting journey ahead, and these will be years of big change in your lives. So I want to leave you with some words that I hold on to, and that I keep as an own personal mantra, and they're from the late and great David Bowie. And he famously said, "I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise it won't be boring." And so on that note of inspiring people with good stories to tell, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. And our keynote speaker for this afternoon is Professor Sir Andy Haynes. He's a professor of public health and primary care at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. He was dean and director of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine for nearly 10 years until October of 2010. Prior to working there, he was a general practitioner and professor of primary health care at UCL from 1987 to 2000. He's worked in a number of countries, including Nepal, USA, and a secondment at WHO. And I can't wait to hear what he has to say. So I'd like to welcome to the podium Professor Sir Andy Haynes.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, dear students, Baroness Howell, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a tremendous privilege for me to participate in this white coat ceremony to celebrate your entry into the medical profession. And I'd like to start really by also paying a tribute to your families and friends and those people who've supported you to get this far. And I'm confident their support will help you to grow as a human being and as a physician and move on to your rightful place in medicine. You're entering the medical profession during an extraordinary epoch in the history of medicine and public health, which is really characterized by an unprecedented growth in knowledge and rapid technological innovation. And yet there are profound inequalities in access to the fruits of these advances. And the trajectory of human development is based on unsustainable exploitation of our shared global environment. Last year, 2015, marked a number of historical landmarks. We had the Climate Change Convention in Paris in December, and we also had the end of the UN Millennium Development Goals. They were a kind of key stepping stone, if you like, towards the advancement of health and the reduction of poverty. They were endorsed in September 2000 by the largest ever gathering of heads of state from 189 countries. And they represent commitments directed towards the developing countries, but in conjunction, at least in theory, in a partnership with the developed countries, to reduce poverty and hunger, to tackle ill health, and to promote sustainable development. With 1990 as the base year for these goals, by the time their end date came at the end of last year, the progress was very mixed. Worldwide, there have been dramatic improvements, for example, in child deaths. We've seen a decline from 12 million a year in 1990 to just over 6 million a year in 2015. So a dramatic decline, despite the fact that there are more births in the world now. Maternal mortality fell as well for around 45%, but the very ambitious targets set by the MDG goals were not fully achieved. And in particular, there were substantial challenges in some sub-Saharan African countries. So we can't just look at the headline figures, we also have to look more in depth at the disparity between different countries. But there was also additional reasons for hope towards the end of that period, because much of the progress that did occur occurred since the year 2000, when we saw increased investments in global health and also the availability of more effective treatments. So, for example, the annual rate of reduction of under 5 mortality was over 5 times faster during the period of 2005 to 2013 than it was in the 5 years after 1990. We've seen tremendous progress in malaria. Over 6 million malaria deaths have been averted over the 15 years since the year 2000. Most of those, of course, in young children under 5. We've also seen extraordinary improvements in the case of HIV, and this really is a success story, still an incomplete success story, but nevertheless a real tribute, I think, to developments in medical technology, in better drugs, also in delivery systems, and also to some extent as well in donor funding and provision of adequate resources. So by June 2014, over 13 million people living with HIV were receiving antiretroviral therapy. And when you think that there were only less than 1 million people in 2003, you can see the rate of progress. And over 7 million deaths were averted. Tuberculosis also been a qualified success story. Tuberculosis prevention, diagnosis and treatment saved an estimated 37 million lives from the year 2000. And TB had a particular resonance for me because as a very young doctor, fairly recently qualified, I went to Nepal to work on a TB treatment program. At that point, we were using quite a long-term, an 18-month regime of drugs. We had a very, very limited repertoire of drugs to offer, virtually nothing for resistant cases, and it was an 18-month course of toxic, quite toxic and unpleasant treatment. One of the things that really struck me, of course, in those in my early experience was, first of all, the effect of poverty. The fact that many people didn't complete their treatment, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. They couldn't actually afford to come back to the centre, the health centre, the clinic, to see me. And so that was a powerful message for me, and made me a very early convert to the idea of universal health coverage, that we should aspire to universal health coverage without payment at the point of care, so that all people can get the health care that they require. And now you, as newly embarking medical professionals, will have the opportunity to contribute to the follow-up of the Millennium Development Goals, which are called the Sustainable Development Goals. And they are much more wider ranging. They're directed at low-income as well as high-income countries, and they encompass healthcare, but also some of the broader determinants of health. But also, for the first time, they include this concept of universal health coverage, which has actually been signed up to by virtually all the governments of the world. And this essentially means giving people the healthcare they need without penalising them financially. And that means, of course, that countries will need to raise funding in an equitable and transparent way in order to achieve these goals. And we need to argue for donor funding to be continued, because there are around about 30 countries in the world that will not be able to reach this target of achieving universal health coverage without substantial donor funding. So we in the health professions need to make the case that that funding needs to be maintained by the developed countries. Globally, we've seen the number of people living in extreme poverty declining from 1.9 billion in 1990 to 836 million in 2015, despite burgeoning world population. But there are these extraordinary inequities, which are really, again, we haven't seen for probably a couple of hundred years historically. So the combined wealth of the 80 richest billionaires on Earth is the same as the bottom 50% of the Earth's population. And clearly that unsustainable inequity is going to pose real social and, to some extent, environmental challenges as well in years to come. And again, I think as health professionals, we need to be arguing against these extreme and widening inequalities on the grounds that they are not conducive to a healthy world population, and they are socially unsustainable. So violence and conflict continue to scar the lives of many, and human rights are all too often violated. For a time it appeared that the number of deaths from conflict was going down, but in recent years we've seen it going back up again, and the number of people displaced by conflict has increased to around 60 million in the last year. So providing healthcare to displaced people is a key priority in today's world, and you, as newly qualified doctors, can play an important role in providing care to displaced people, to refugees, wherever they are, and of course they're displaced throughout the world. And sadly, in many countries, there's an argument, there's an increasing tendency to marginalise refugees and prevent them getting the health care that they require. And they should be accorded the same rights as everyone else. Surgery too, if you elect to go into surgery, there's so much that can be done through surgical and anaesthetic techniques. Mortality and morbidity from common conditions needing surgery have grown in the world's poorest regions, both in real terms and relative to other health gains. At the same time, we know that the development of safe, essential, life-saving surgical and anaesthetic care in low-income countries has stagnated or regressed. And during this period, of course, our capacity to deliver that care has improved dramatically. So in the absence of affordable and effective surgical care in many countries, case fatality rates continue to be high for many common and easily treatable conditions that you will see as students and young doctors, including things like appendicitis, hernias, fractures, obstructive labour, and common cancers as well. So one priority, as outlined by the recent Lancet Commission on Global Surgery, is really to extend coverage to these basic surgical procedures which can relieve so much suffering and prolong life. The burgeoning epidemics of non-communicable diseases, diabetes, obesity, coronary disease, and injuries in many low and middle income countries will have tragically predictable consequences for public health, and they constitute a double burden of disease. So there's not just the traditional burden of undernutrition and infectious diseases, but also for many countries this growing burden of non-communicable diseases. And of the estimated 58 million deaths in 2015, 35 million will die of a chronic non-communicable disease. Smoking alone could lead to 1 billion deaths during this century without public health action. So that means that all of us need to be, as well as delivering outstanding clinical care for people with chronic, these non-communicable and infectious diseases, we also need to be strong advocates for public health, anti-smoking, and also other policies which can improve health. In developed countries, many health challenges remain. In a country here like the UK, we have seen an increase in life expectancy. We've seen an increase in life expectancy for 4 years on average over the 20 years up to 2010. But sadly, this increasing length of life has not been paralleled by an increase in the quality of life, in the number of years of people living a good quality life. So age groups, for example, the contribution of Alzheimer's disease, other conditions like cirrhosis, either from alcohol or hepatitis C, and drug use disorders is contributing substantially increased burden of premature mortality in recent years. So this combination of increasing burden of disability and chronic disease, changing public expectations, technological advance, discontinuity between health and social care is placing growing demands on health systems in countries like the UK at a time when funding is often plateauing. So the advances that we have seen have occurred for a number of reasons. Obviously from improved clinical care, advances in knowledge, but also improvements in public health, and in those countries where they've occurred, also reductions in poverty. So what are the implications of all this for those of you moving into medicine? Well, I think there are a number of important implications. One of them, I think, is really important to choose the kind of role models that you follow in your medical career. I've been very fortunate that I've had a number of influential role models in my medical career. One of them was a man called Julian Tudor Hart, who some of you may have heard of. He was a very, and still is, he's still alive, he's a very influential, if you like, medical philosopher. He had a very bright career in hospital medicine ahead of him. He was a very leading graduate of his time, but he elected to go and work in a very poor community in the mining valleys of South Wales, where there was a very high unemployment rate and a very heavy burden of disease. And I was fortunate to, as a young doctor, work as his trainee and research assistant. And he made a number of key contributions. One of those was to combine the mindset of public health, the whole population approach, with clinical practice. So combining individual patient care with looking at whole populations and demonstrating how, by monitoring risk factors over time, you can actually reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases. And he also wrote a seminal article, The Inverse Care Law, which showed that those who most needed healthcare could least afford to pay for it. And this reinforced really my belief that we need to move towards and to maintain our National Health Service and to move towards that in countries which don't already have it. The second, I think, important implication is that we have to see the whole person. This has already been referred to, but looking at the whole person is absolutely crucial for health professionals, whatever specialty you're in. The aging population means that many of the people that we see are suffering from multimorbidity. They don't fall into neat compartments of a single disease. They have 4 or 5 different conditions. Some of them are on 6, 7, 8, 9 different medications. We can argue whether they need to be on them, but they are. So it's really important, as well as learning about individual diseases, also to look at how we deal with the accumulated burden of multiple conditions, some of which share common risk factors. And we can't have vertical programs for all these diseases. They need to have an integrated approach. It's important then for you to see the patient in their entirety in the community and with the family that they live with. And a person, of course, is not just about physical health. We know that there's a strong correlation between physical and mental ill health. So we need to pay attention to the mental well-being of our patients. Remember that healthcare does not end at the doors of the hospital. I've spent a lot of my professional life actually working outside hospitals and communities. So ask patients in hospitals about their home and family circumstances. There's no point in discharging an 85-year-old who's just broken a hip, she's had a successful surgery. There's no point in returning her home if she lives alone up 3 flights of stairs. She's not going to get up them. So take some basic social history before you discharge your patient. You need to ensure that their return to the community is a smooth one and focus very much on their functioning, not just on treating disease. So doctors are not just technical experts, they must also have compassion and empathy for the vulnerable. And we're all vulnerable, by the way, at some point in our life, just remember that. So it's important for us to understand what the patient's agenda is in all this. And my late friend and colleague, Cecil Hellman, was a family doctor. He qualified in apartheid South Africa. He decided to leave the country because of his opposition to apartheid, but he also trained as an anthropologist. And he was a very talented writer and communicator, and I would recommend some of his books to you. In one of his last books, he called The Suburban Shaman, and he chronicled how the culture and beliefs of his patients shape their clinical presentations, and how understanding their beliefs and perceptions can help them to cope better with their illness. And he showed that sometimes when we can't cure the patient, we can still make a difference by supporting the patient and their family through difficult times. And my wife recently told me a story. She's a family doctor, and she told me of a story of a man who came in to see her one morning it was a bright spring morning. He came in, he sat down, he put his head in his hands, and he said, "Doctor, I've got an awful headache. I've got a terrible headache which I can't tolerate." So he sat in front of her with his head in his hands, groaning, and she looked back through his records. She'd never seen him before. He didn't often come to see the doctor. There were very few entries in his records. She went back. 10 years ago to that day, there was a one-line entry in his records. Son died, committed suicide. So she said to him, gently, "Do you know what date it is today?" He looked up, and his face, the growing recognition on his face, he stood up, he walked to the door of the consultation room, and he made to go out, and she said to him, "Is there anything I can do for you more?" And he said, "No, doctor, now I understand." So by being there and helping to interpret his pain and his suffering, the somatic symptoms that he was producing, she was able to show some empathy with him and to hopefully support him through a difficult time. So much distress is expressed in bodily terms, and if we treat it as a disease, we risk medicalizing ill health and reinforcing dependency. But at the same time, of course, overlooking serious illness is a real risk. And as doctors, we always have to make that difficult judgment. Are we reinforcing the medicalization of distress, or are we missing a serious organic illness? And that balance is something we must strive to get right through the whole of our professional career. The third point, the third important observation I'd like to make is the importance of just keeping up. The pace of knowledge is unrelenting. The development of therapeutic possibilities is unprecedentedly rapid. Keeping up is difficult, and it requires a commitment to lifelong learning and a willingness to be self-reflective and to be self-critical, to subject your own practice to audit, as well as the ability to learn from your mistakes. And we all make mistakes, and what's important really is to learn from those and make sure you don't make the same mistake twice. We need to maintain our critical faculties. We shouldn't always accept necessarily what our teacher tells us. We also have to go away and verify that ourselves. And it's a very important skill to go away and look for that evidence yourself. We can't read, though, even a small proportion of the 2 million articles published every year. So what do we do as busy health professionals? We need to know where to turn for the best available evidence. And we can get that from systematic reviews or clinical guidelines. And one of the other people that influenced my career is a man called Archie Cochrane. Archie Cochrane was an epidemiologist. He worked for part of his life in South Wales. And he was really a trailblazing thinker in medicine. And he developed the idea that we need to assess the effectiveness of interventions by rigorous research. Before he advanced these ideas, you know, many of the ideas came that you just followed what the senior professor said. If that professor said, well, this is the right treatment, then well, it must be the right treatment. But what Archie Cochrane said was, no, we need to go back to basic principles. We need to understand whether this really is the best treatment. And the only way we could do that is by designing rigorous research. It's also important, I think, to accept that our resources are not infinite. They will never be infinite. So we always have to make decisions about what treatment to implement and what treatment to withhold. And our primary responsibility is to the patient in front of us. But we also have a broader responsibility to use resources wisely. So, for example, if I prescribe an antibiotic to every patient I see with a cough and cold, that will add to the growing burden of antibiotic resistance, and it won't help the patient. It will squander limited resources. And we also know that too many new drugs are me too drugs. They are, in other words, minor variants of current drugs. They do not offer very substantial therapeutic advances. So we need to be very aware that we're giving people the most cost-effective interventions and medications, not just the most recent one. So sometimes, of course, though, evidence doesn't exist, and one of the examples that I experienced during my career was one night when I was doing voluntary duty. I used to, as we've already heard, volunteering is an important part of our medical career, and I used to do some voluntary work as a medical officer at concerts, at music concerts, at rock concerts and so on. And one night I was on duty at a big music venue in London, and I was in the room. We have a sort of almost subterranean room towards the back of the concert hall. I was on duty with a nurse, and a young woman suddenly threw open the door, ran in, closely followed by her boyfriend. She was babbling incoherently. It was difficult to know what she'd taken. But without further ado, her boyfriend stopped in the middle of the room. She jumped up, bit him on the nose, and wrapped her legs around him. At this point, all hell let loose. She was screaming, he was screaming, the nurse and I were looking at each other. They never taught me about this in medical school. What do you do when someone's got their teeth sunk into the end of someone else's nose? If you pull them, the nose will come off, so not a very good strategy. Fortunately, that great solver of problems, time, intervened, and after what seemed like hours, but was probably only a few minutes, she relinquished her grip. She stood up. She ran out of the room screaming again, followed by the presumably ex-partner, also screaming. And the nurse and I were really grateful that her powers of grip were limited. So you always have to adapt your knowledge to the challenges and the problems that are thrown up during your professional career. The fourth point is about leadership and about teams. And during your professional career, you will work always in teams, probably, or largely in teams, and later on you will probably occupy some kind of leadership role. So leadership itself is an acquired skill, and it's important that you start to hone those skills when you're in your undergraduate training. Now, it's not about telling people what to do. People often think, well, leadership's about being the boss and telling people what to do. Well, sometimes you need to do that, but it's actually more about ensuring that every team member knows their role and achieves their full potential. And all members of the team are important, On the wards, the cleaners, the auxiliaries, they're also important, not just the senior consultant. So look at the whole team. And many problems in healthcare are not just due to single errors by incompetent individuals, they're because of systemic failures and sometimes leadership failures, which means that we don't collectively learn from our mistakes. So as you can judge, I'm not a great enthusiast of the Donald Trump school of leadership, which seems to rely on arrogance and hot air rather than the kind of reflective leadership that we really need from our leaders. Fifthly, I would say, look at the wider context. You're all going to be specializing in something or other, but keep an interest and an eye open for what's happening in broader society. And by that I mean the social and environmental determinants of health, because so many of the determinants of health are outside the healthcare system. And even if you're not in public health, you need to be aware of that. Increasingly, we're understanding that our current patterns of consumption and development may prejudice the health of future generations. And that's been the focus of my work over recent years. And it was particularly inspiring for me to see at the Paris Climate Change Conference that the health professionals for the first time were really stepping up and making their voice heard. For example, in the run-up to Paris, we heard statements signed by 1,700 medical organizations representing 13 million health professionals, 800 hospitals, also all endorsed this statement urging governments to act and to come to an agreement in Paris which would reduce greenhouse gas emissions and prevent dangerous climate change. Well, we did get an agreement in Paris. It wasn't sufficient to prevent dangerous climate change, but it's the first stop on that road. So I would just leave you with the point that it's important, I think, sometimes in our careers to stand up and be counted about these broader issues of health. And when that time comes, to put our names to these kind of collective endeavours to try to support public health and make an impact on the global scale. But it's also important to think global and act local. So there's a lot of work we can do in our day-to-day work, whether it's with our hospitals, ensuring that they're having a lower environmental footprint, whether it's talking to patients about their lifestyles and how they can improve their lifestyles, improve their health, as well as reducing their environmental footprint. These are all important conversations to have. So in this divided world, confronted by the two faces of poverty on the one hand and overconsumption on the other, the skills and knowledge that you will acquire during your time in medical school are needed now more than ever. And I would like to close by quoting the words of the Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913. And in his work entitled Where the Mind is Without Fear, he points to a mental state where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit. And I believe and hope that your experience as a student will help to sustain that clear stream of reason, to avoid the dead habit, but also I hope confirm that you made absolutely the right choice in choosing medicine. Despite the stresses, it's a wonderful profession and it provides a spectrum of opportunities to support and suit all interests and capabilities. And I conclude by wishing you every success in pursuing your chosen career for the benefit of humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Andy Haynes, for those incredibly inspiring words. And now, to welcome each of you to the medical profession at St. George's University School of Medicine, we'll now present you with your white coat, which will be symbolizing your entry into the profession and your commitment to uphold the duties and trust associated with medicine and medical training. So at this time, I'd like to introduce you to our robers. So first of all, Professor Andy Haynes, who is our fellow physician, Dr. Marius Lucas, the Dean of Basic Sciences at St. George's University, Professor Shiva Yogi Bushnamath, co-chair and professor of pathology at St. George's University, and Dr. Namita Kumar, the postgraduate dean for Health Education Northeast. So we will now begin robing students. And in recognition of our international enrollment, Dr. David Holmes, associate for the KBT Global Scholars Program, will call each student by name and state their country of birth. Please hold your applause until all students have been robed, and for safety, we'll ask you to remain seated during the process.
Mercy Adesua, Ontario, Canada. Omotara Oguntei, Nigeria. Cherise Drost, New Brunswick, Canada. Belinda Williams, Ontario, Canada. Brendan Smith, Ontario, Canada. Bijal Shah, California, USA. Anjali Kevarolamani, India. Nicholas Mulchan, New York, USA. Eddie Uduyen, Nigeria. Alex Wang, Texas, USA. York Wang, New York, USA. Audrey Lam, Ontario, Canada. Vishaka Shetram, Ontario, Canada. Corbin Ma, British Columbia, Canada. Andrew Masaband, California, USA. Surav Dutta, New Jersey, USA. Sefu Tu, Ontario, Canada. Kabir Kawale Ramani, India. Fatima Jate, Gambia. Irini Abdel Messe, California, USA. Joseph Rothstein, Quebec, Canada. Connor Smith, Ontario, Canada. Jodie Freesey, Ontario, Canada. Ruthie Tam, California, USA. Melody Saltipi, Ontario, Canada. Farnaz Abbasimorati, Quebec, Canada. Alam Bawaza, Ontario, Canada. Badan Shah, Ontario, Canada. Rebecca Mwansi, Uganda. Ram Miller, Ontario, Canada. Mina Atalia, Ontario, Canada. Eduardo Apelianz is Mexico. Patricia Huey, Ontario, Canada. Paul Aguilera, California, USA. Matthew Barras, New Brunswick, Canada. Cameron Garagosio, Florida, USA. Omar El Kadri, Alberta, Canada. Cleon Gadonis, Ontario, Canada. Arjan Palawi, Ontario, Canada. Michael Salvian, British Columbia, Canada. Faisal Raghavi, Alberta, Canada. Ashish Rihal, New York, USA. Alexandra Brodka, Ontario, Canada. Lauren Parr, Michigan, USA. Fernando Palamco, British Columbia, Canada.
I would like to ask the students and all doctors present to stand and recite aloud with me the professional commitment listed in your programs. Today is the beginning of my medical education and training as a physician. I acknowledge my responsibility to continue the pursuit of knowledge and understanding until that day when I will cease to be a practicing physician. I am entering training for a noble profession in which my interest must always be subservient to those who may seek my assistance. I must be ever conscious of the value of my fellow health professionals and treat them with respect at all times. My classmates at St. George's University are now my colleagues, and I owe to them the same support and encouragement to achieve their goals as I hope to receive from them. I will work alongside my colleagues and professors with tolerance, compassion, and honesty. I acknowledge my obligation to adhere to the University Honor Code to conduct myself with integrity in an ethical manner at all times henceforth. I shall do all within my power to show in myself an example of all that is honorable and good throughout my medical career. It is a privilege to have been given the opportunity to become a physician. May I be ever conscious of that privilege and never abuse it. Please be seated. On behalf of SGU, I would like to thank the Arnold Gold Foundation for the Humanism in Medicine pins placed on each student's white coat. I would like to thank students, families, SGU faculty, staff, administrators for your support and presence at this ceremony. I would also like to cordially invite all of you to attend the reception in Escape in honor of the recipients of the white coats today. Thank you again so much for coming. I ask that you please stand as the Dice Party exits, followed by the students.